Hi, welcome to Human Sexuality with me, your instructor, Cynthia Anderson Sanchez. Today we are going to discuss fetal development and sexual differentiation. Let's begin by looking at some of the universal questions that are commonly asked. You might wonder how you developed, how did you get here, why are you male or female, and what do genes and hormones have to do with any of it? The question that parents don't want to hear is, where do babies come from? Now, most parents blush at the thought of their curious 5-year-old child asking, where do babies come from? But do you really know what it's all about? There is a whole lot more to learn. Scientists are still finding out more fascinating details about how we all came into existence. It is a lot of hard biological work to create a life. A whole lot had to happen in just a very specific way in order for you to be here today looking at this video. Did you know all babies start out as female in the womb? When we look at how gender is formed, we really begin to see the breakdown between what is commonly thought of as male versus female. We talked last time about what happens in the menstrual cycle. A woman's body goes through constant changes, building up and tearing down the uterine lining, preparing for that possible pregnancy. This time, we will look at what happens when that egg gets fertilized. This is the story of your life. So, how did you get here? Well, once upon a time, there was a very special egg called an ovum that lived in the ovary of your mother. During ovulation, that egg was released from the follicle inside the ovary and traveled to the fallopian tube. The egg from your mom and a sperm from your dad met in the fallopian tube. That sperm had to reach it in time in order for fertilization to occur. Usually in textbooks, you will see a drawing of these huge sperm that are about half the size of the egg, but in reality, the egg is several times larger than the sperm, as we can see here in this video from medical videos. This video is showing in vitro fertilization, which is a technique in which eggs, or ova, are placed in a petri dish and then exposed to spermatozoa. Notice here that the spermatozoa surround the egg and basically have to fight their way in. The egg has a protective layer that inhibits the sperm from directly being able to fertilize it. Instead, the spermatozoa secretes enzymes that penetrate through the protective layer. The sperm must compete with other sperm in a race to see which of the spermatozoa will be able to gain access to the egg for fertilization. Once one of these spermatozoa succeeds at gaining access to the egg, the spermatozoa will fuse to the egg and then insert its genetic material. Once this occurs, the egg will form a special layer called the fertilization membrane, or zona pellucida. This prevents other spermatozoa from gaining access to the egg. Nature does this because it is important that only the strongest, healthiest spermatozoa get the chance to fertilize that egg. This is a process of natural selection. Eggs fertilized with healthy sperm are more likely to survive and thrive. So now let's walk through just what happens after fertilization. We're going to start at day 0, which we show here as the day of fertilization. The trillions of cells that currently make up the marvelous you began here at fertilization. You inherited 23 chromosomes from your mom in the egg that made you. For your sex chromosome, eggs always carry an X chromosome. So this means you have an X chromosome from your mom, whether you are male or female. You inherited another 23 chromosomes from your dad through the sperm that made you. This poor little sperm had to conquer tremendous obstacles and competition in order to get to the egg. For your sex chromosome, the sperm can carry either an X chromosome or a Y chromosome. If you are male, you inherited a Y chromosome. If you are female, you inherited an X chromosome from the sperm. During fertilization, the sperm penetrates through the protective coating of the egg and then fuses with the membrane. The sperm then inserts its DNA into the egg. When this happens, a fertilization membrane will form to prevent any additional sperm from invading. The genetic material from the egg and sperm come together to produce what is called a zygote. It takes about 8 to 9 days for the fertilized egg to move through the length of the fallopian tube to the uterus. On its journey, the first cell divisions take place. On day 1, we see that there is a zygote that is formed. On day 2, we've got the cleavage stage, which gives you the 2 to 8 cells. On day 4, you have a solid mass of cells, which is called a morula. And on day 5, a blastocyst will form. So around day 8 to 9, it is time for implantation. The cells of the uterus will undergo rapid cell division to surround the embryo. About 8 to 9 weeks after fertilization, we then begin to characterize the embryo as a fetus due to the development of recognizable features. So during week 1, the zygote travels from the fallopian tube to the uterus. Week 2, the embryo gets implanted in the wall of the uterus. In week 3, we already begin to see the formation of the heart and the central nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, even though at this point they're really not recognizable too much. Week 4, you begin to see the eyes form and small tiny limb buds. In week 5, the limbs, heart, and eyes become more visible and pronounced. In week 6, you begin to see ears and teeth. In week 7, your mouth began to develop. And in week 8, this is where your external genitalia begin to form. We're going to discuss that at length here. This is called sexual differentiation. What does sexual differentiation entail? Sexual differentiation refers to the development of the anatomical features of the reproductive tracts. Sexual differentiation begins in the fetus at week 6. Let's find out how this occurs. At this 8 to 9 week stage of development, the primitive reproductive tracts are in a formation of a pair of ducts called the Mullerian duct and the Wolffian duct. As development proceeds, one of the pairs of ducts develops while the other regresses, depending on the presence or absence of the sex-determining region of the Y chromosome, called the SRY gene. The Y chromosome is here. The formation of male-specific reproductive organs depends on the presence or absence of the SRY gene. The SRY gene is only found on the sex-determining region of the Y chromosome. Now remember that in order to have a Y chromosome, you should be a male. So how does the SRY gene work? First, the SRY gene gets transcribed and translated to make testes determining factor, or SRY protein. Testes determining factor, or TDF, functions as a transcription factor. TDF travels to the DNA and binds to it. Testes determining factor, or TDF, binding allows for transcription and translation of genes that create other important transcription factors like SOX-X. SOX-X then will go and bind to a different portion of DNA, allowing for other genes to be expressed. So this causes a whole cascade of events. The SOX9 in particular is important because it acts to develop the primitive testes. The testes then begin to mature and create different types of cells within it that will play a key role in further sexual differentiation. The developing testes contain two types of specialized cells: the Leydig cells, which release testosterone, and Sertoli cells, which release anti-Mullerian hormone, or AMH. Testosterone triggers the development of the Wolffian duct into the male reproductive organs, the epididymis, the vas deferens, and the seminal vesicles. While testosterone is secreted from the testes, acts to stimulate the growth and development of male reproductive organs, the anti-Mullerian hormone, or AMH, acts to inhibit the formation of the Mullerian duct, which would have matured into female reproductive organs, including the fallopian tubes, uterus, and the vagina. During week 8 of development, you begin to have your ears and genitalia become more noticeable and more defined. At week 16, the external genitalia are fully formed. This is usually when you can determine the sex of the fetus. During weeks 20 to 36, the brain becomes more developed and the features of the fetus become more defined and recognizable. Week 38, the fetus is fully formed and ready for birth.